When the first sun rose, it lit the sky. When the second followed, it lit her soul. In that double dawn, the world saw her eyes shimmer like two small galaxies. And in that moment, Leora Vance became the girl who could hear light whisper. The morning began like a hymn no one remembered how to sing. The first sun, Solara, broke through the bruised clouds above Newark, casting its pale warmth over rusted skyscrapers and hollow cathedrals. The city always felt torn between science and sanctity. Engineers praying before machines, preachers quoting equations as if the numbers themselves were holy. And then, moments after Solara's ascent, the second sun, Umbra, rose. Not in the sky, but in the mind. Those attuned to the flow could feel it surge through them like a current of golden ink. Their thoughts shimmered, their veins hummed, and somewhere deep in the streets below, a girl opened her eyes to both lights at once. Leora Vance. Her small apartment in the southern sprawl was little more than a cube of faded metal and woven light threads. The monks who raised her believed simplicity purified resonance, that clutter dulled the harmony of the soul. But this morning, the room was anything but silent. Every object, the cracked mirror, the bowl of cooling incense, the folded prayer cloths, thrummed like the strings of a great cosmic instrument. Leora sat cross-legged in the center, palms open. Her brown skin glowed faintly, as if catching sunlight from within. Strands of black hair floated around her head, rising and falling with invisible waves of air. She wasn't meditating. She was listening. The flow spoke in harmonics, not words, a vibration that only those aligned with liturgy could perceive. The monks called it communion. Leora called it loneliness with sound. A voice, not human, not divine, but something between, rippled through her consciousness. When the twin suns align, two paths shall cross. Her breath hitched. She'd heard that line before, in her earliest visions as a child. The prophecy the monks whispered about in half fear, half awe. One born of light, the other of reason. Together they shall unmake the sky. Her fingers trembled. Not again, she murmured. Not today. She pushed the flow away, or tried to. The energy recoiled like a wounded animal, snapping the air with invisible sparks. The mirror on her wall shattered, scattering reflections of both suns across the floor. The incense flame elongated, twisting into strange symbols that shimmered before fading to ash. And then silence. The kind that presses against your chest, heavy and absolute. Leora's eyes opened slowly. Her pupils glowed gold for a heartbeat before dimming. She exhaled shakily and touched the broken mirror. Every time I try to ignore you, she whispered, you find a louder way to speak. A knock echoed from the door. 3 precise taps, evenly spaced. No one else knocked like that except one person. Brother Keth. She rose, brushed dust from her robe, and opened the door. The monk's tall figure stood there, wrapped in silver-gray cloth that shimmered faintly in the dawn. His bald head reflected the sunlight like polished stone, and the mark of the ecliptic order burned faintly blue on his forehead. Child of the second dawn, he greeted, voice calm as still water. You heard it again. Leora's jaw tightened. You always know. The flow whispers louder around you, he said simply. The suns tremble because they know your name. She hated when he spoke like that, as though she were a prophecy in human form instead of a woman trying to breathe without shaking the world. Keth stepped inside and surveyed the shattered mirror. The flow is restless, he said. It stirs because the equilibrium falters. The rational dominion expands westward. They have begun constructing faith dampeners near the border. Leora frowned. You mean they're trying to silence belief? He nodded. To them, miracles are merely unmeasured forces. They seek to drain the flow through calculation. A small laugh escaped her lips, sharp and bitter. So the answer to too much power is more control. Typical dominion arrogance. Arrogance, Keth agreed, and fear. His gaze softened. You must travel east, to Orem City. The order senses imbalance there. The flow weaves in chaotic patterns. Faith surging without form, reason collapsing under its own weight. You will go to restore harmony. Leora stiffened. Alone. Keth's silence was answer enough. She sighed and turned to the window. The dual suns painted her reflection in gold and silver. Two halos overlapping. You think I'm ready. The flow thinks you must be. Hours later, Leora walked the glass causeways of New Ark's lower belt, where remnants of old civilization pulsed beneath neon scripture. Holographic prayers scrolled across the sides of buildings, flickering beside digital graffiti. Faith is code. God.exe has crashed. Two suns, one truth. The people here didn't look up at either sun anymore. They only looked down, at data screens, at markets at their feet. Leora moved among them like a ghost, her robes fluttering in the urban wind. Her destination lay beyond the city's shimmering dome, the transit spire, a monolith that channeled both spiritual and physical energy across states. She passed a group of children drawing patterns in dust. One little boy looked up at her, eyes wide. "Miss, are you a light reader?" She smiled faintly. "Something like that." He grinned, holding up a small piece of cracked glass. "Then can you fix this?" The glass, a fragment of an old solar lens, reflected her face in fractured pieces. She saw herself a dozen times, each slightly different. Some calm, some afraid. Without thinking, she placed her hands around it. Warmth bloomed from her palms, soft and radiant. The cracks began to mend, threads of golden energy weaving through. The boy gasped. "You did it." Leora crouched to his level, handing it back. "Don't thank me," she said softly. "Thank the flow. It listens when hearts are kind." As she rose and continued on, she caught sight of her reflection again in a window. Just for a moment, the other reflection smiled before she did. Her pulse skipped. The flow was watching. The transit spire loomed ahead, a pillar of shifting light connecting earth and heaven. The monks of the ecliptic order often said it was built where both suns' paths once crossed, a thin place, where matter and thought intertwined. At its base, transport vessels glowed faintly, sleek ships suspended by threads of light. Pilgrims, traders, and mystics alike queued, their robes and suits glowing with faint resonance marks. As Leora presented her sigil to the gatekeeper, a low vibration rippled through the ground. People gasped. The air shimmered briefly, like heat waves. The gatekeeper frowned. Another Lunergy surge? Leora felt it before he finished speaking, the flow quivering beneath her feet, the world's invisible rhythm stuttering. The voice returned, faint but distinct. When the twin suns align. Her heartbeat quickened. She didn't wait for clearance, she ran. Through the crowd, past the guards, toward the nearest vessel. Alarms blared. Someone shouted her name, but the flow was louder. The surge spiked. The vessel's engines flickered, overloading with raw Lunergy. Sparks rained from its sides. Without thinking, Leora raised her arms. Light erupted around her like a second sunrise. The explosion never came. Instead, the ship froze midair, suspended in a cocoon of golden energy. Time slowed. The crowd stared as Leora's eyes flared with burning light, her voice trembling as she chanted the ecliptic hymn of resonance. The ship landed gently, untouched. When the silence broke, whispers rippled through the crowd. The harmonic child. She's real. She speaks to the suns. Leora staggered, exhausted. Her hands trembled as she turned away. "It's not a gift," she muttered to herself. "It's a burden wearing gold." She boarded quietly after that, disappearing into the vessel's glow as the city receded beneath her. Ahead, in the direction of the Twin Suns crossing, waited Aurum City, and the man she had yet to meet, the one who would change everything. In moments of power, do you believe faith and logic can truly coexist, or must one always silence the other? Tell me what you think. The ship's engines hummed softly as it ascended through clouds of silver mist. Outside the windows, both suns shimmered closer together than ever before, their light bleeding into each other. One bright, one dark, one real, one imagined. Leora pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the hum of the flow vibrate against her pulse. "Two paths," she whispered. "Light and reason." She smiled faintly, though her eyes glimmered with unease. Let's see what happens when they finally meet. Far below, unseen, in the Dominion's laboratories of metal and logic, Arden Hale adjusted his instruments, and for the first time in his life, the numbers disobeyed him. The suns, it seemed, had begun to listen. The Dominion never slept. Even in the dead of night, when Solara hid beneath the horizon and Umbra pulsed faintly through the minds of the attuned, the city of Helion Verge thrummed with equations. Its towers weren't built of stone or glass but of data. Countless lattices of light carrying information through invisible veins. The Dominion believed that to measure something was to own it, and to own it was to understand it. But Arden Hale had long since stopped believing in ownership, or understanding. Inside a research chamber buried beneath the verge, he stood before a sphere of pure lunargy suspended in midair. The sphere was the size of a human heart, contained within 6 magnetic rings etched with sigils of both science and sacrilege. It pulsed faintly, almost as if it breathed. Arden's pale face was lit by its glow. His dark hair hung loose, eyes a cold shade of steel blue. On the surface, he looked calm, but beneath that calm was a storm of defiance, the kind that only comes from knowing you're right when the entire world insists you're wrong. He whispered to the sphere as though to a friend. Energy born of thought, shaped by emotion, bound by logic. You shouldn't exist. And yet here you are. The computer beside him blinked to life. Lunargy stability. 14.02%. Fluctuation detected. Arden smiled faintly. 14% stability. Better than last time. He adjusted the dials. Maybe this time you won't explode in my face. A metallic voice echoed behind him. Dr. Hale, unauthorized experiment 447 detected. You are in violation of Rational Code Section 9. He didn't turn around. Good evening, Overseer. A humanoid figure stepped from the shadows. An artificial guardian formed of geometric panels and white light. The Overseer's voice carried no emotion, only precision. You were ordered to cease all independent lunargy studies. The Council deemed them non-empirical. That's the problem with the Council, Arden said softly, still adjusting the frequency calibrator. They think anything unmeasured is untrue. But what happens when measurement itself changes reality? Philosophy is not science. Neither is blindness, he shot back. The Overseer moved closer, light flickering through its core. Dr. Hale, this is your final warning. Deactivate the reactor. He sighed, turning at last. You ever wonder what separates faith from logic? He asked. It's not belief, it's courage. Faith leaps. Logic hesitates. I'm done hesitating. And with that, he pressed the switch. The chamber erupted in a flare of white gold light. The Overseer's systems flickered, alarms shrieked, and for a brief instant, every machine in Helion Verge froze. Every clock, every drone, every stream of data. All paused mid-beat. Arden's eyes widened as the sphere stabilized, humming in perfect resonance. For the first time, the equations didn't fail him, they sang. He stepped closer, awe flickering across his face. You're alive, he whispered. Then, without warning, the resonance spiked. The sphere pulsed once, twice, and shattered. Light tore through the room like a living thing. The Overseer was flung backward, its panels fragmenting into shards. Arden was hurled against the wall, breath knocked out of him. When he opened his eyes, he saw something impossible. Patterns of gold etched into the floor, forming symbols not of science but of prayer. He lay there for several long seconds, laughing weakly. So that's what a miracle looks like. When the Dominion Council arrived hours later, they didn't share his awe. They saw blasphemy. Arden Hale, intoned High Logician Sereth, his voice sharp as a blade. You have violated the sacred axiom. No unquantified forces, no faith constructs. You've blended heresy with calculus. Arden stood handcuffed before them, defiant even in restraint. Then maybe your axiom was too small. Murmurs rippled through the room. The council chambers were grand, walls lined with shifting formulas, each representing a universal constant. The Dominion's most brilliant minds sat in cold judgment, their eyes devoid of warmth. Sereth rose. You sought to replicate the flow, the divine field. You built a reactor that channels consciousness. Such things belong to mystics, not rationalists. Arden met his gaze without fear. Maybe mystics were just scientists who asked better questions. Gasps filled the hall. Saratha's face hardened. You are hereby stripped of your credentials, your citizenship, and your freedom. You will be exiled to the outer territories. The guards moved to take him. Arden's smile returned. Thin, weary, but unbroken. Exile. You mean a wider lab. They threw him out of Helion Verge 3 days later, dumping him at the edge of the Dominion's border. Beyond it stretched a wasteland of half-ruined cities and ungoverned lands, a no-man's zone known as the Divide, where the flow ran wild and unmeasured. He carried nothing but his coat, a worn satchel of tools, and a single fragment of the shattered Lunargy sphere sealed in glass. The fragment pulsed faintly as he walked. It shouldn't have, yet it did. He held it up against the light. So you're the leftover miracle, huh? Let's see what you can teach me. Days turned into weeks. Arden scavenged through forgotten towns, setting up temporary labs in the shells of old churches and abandoned observatories. The Divide was a strange place. Here, the flow and the physical world blurred. Equations wouldn't hold steady. Machines disobeyed. Even the air seemed to hum with half-formed thoughts. Most people feared it. Arden thrived in it. He began to record his findings in a worn notebook, the Codex of Deviations. He charted fluctuations, mapped anomalies, and even recorded whispers from what he called resonant pockets. But then came the dream. It began one night when Umbra rose strong, a mental light that filled his sleep with sound. He stood in a field of gold and shadow, 2 suns overhead. And in the distance, a woman stood with her hands outstretched, light swirling around her like a living storm. Her skin glowed with the warmth of creation itself. Her eyes met his, and he felt her see him as though she were reading his very soul. He woke gasping, the fragment in his satchel pulsing violently. Equations danced behind his eyelids. Patterns he'd never seen before, merging logic with melody, structure with faith. For the first time in his life, numbers sang to him. He wrote through the night, feverish. The flow isn't divine, he murmured. It's structured. It's measurable, but it responds to intention. Not belief, not power, but alignment. He didn't know her name. He didn't even know if she was real. But he knew one thing, she was the key. By dawn, Arden reached an abandoned data outpost near the old Mississippi ruins. The building's solar towers still worked faintly, shimmering in the morning haze. He powered one up, rerouting energy from the fragment. The screens flickered, displaying maps of Lunargy currents across the continent. One location pulsed brighter than the rest. Orem City. His heartbeat quickened. The readings were impossible. Lunargy concentration exceeding stable thresholds. Emotional harmonics off the charts. He touched the screen. Whoever you are, you're there. He didn't know it yet, but at that same moment, aboard the vessel descending toward Orem, Leora Vance felt a pulse in her chest, the same rhythm, the same frequency. 2 minds, separated by belief and distance, now shared a single beat. Arden stood before the screen, the second sun shimmering faintly in his mind's eye. His reflection looked strange, like a man illuminated by something more than light. He whispered to the fragment in his hand, "You're leading me somewhere, aren't you?" The fragment pulsed once in answer. He smiled, a rare, quiet thing. "Then let's go unmake the sky." He packed his tools, slung the satchel over his shoulder, and set off toward Orem. Behind him, the outpost flickered once more, then died, its last signal carried upward like a prayer made of numbers. What do you think drives people more? Belief in something greater, or refusal to accept limits? Drop your thoughts. The sun rose, first Solara, then Umbra, and for the briefest heartbeat, they aligned, casting a twin shadow across the land. Somewhere in that shimmering horizon, 2 paths drew closer, pulled by the same unseen current. The woman who read light like scripture. The man who calculated divinity. And the world, though it didn't yet know it, was about to tremble. Orem City floated above the ruins of the old world like a crown of glass and fire. Suspended on vast Lunargy pylons that shimmered with molten light, it drifted in the thin air above the Mississippi Verge. Half metropolis, half miracle. Every inch of it pulsed with living resonance. Its spires weren't built. They were grown from crystallized belief, nourished by centuries of prayer and physics fused into one. It was said the city itself was alive, listening, dreaming. And lately it had been dreaming of destruction. Leora's ship breached the outer veil at dawn. Both suns hung in the horizon, their lights blending to paint the sky in impossible colors. Violet, gold, silver blue. The closer she drew, the more she felt the flow trembling beneath her skin, whispering in tones of warning. Her instructor's last words echoed in her mind. Restore harmony, child of the second dawn. But harmony, she was beginning to learn, wasn't peace. It was tension in balance. And Aurum was losing that balance fast. Her pilot, a quiet automaton of polished brass and soft voice modulation, spoke without looking back. Madam Vance, reactor instability has reached red-level thresholds. The city's lower pylons are entering a critical phase. How long? She asked. Less than 3 hours before gravitational field loss. Leora's stomach clenched. And evacuation? Impossible. The flow surrounding the city is too volatile for transit vessels to stabilize. She rose from her seat and looked through the window. The city sprawled beneath her like a mosaic of light and shadow. Grand temples of the ecliptic order beside data towers of the rational dominion. Aurum was the one place where faith and science coexisted, barely. And now it was tearing itself apart because of it. She landed at the upper port, robes billowing as she stepped onto the crystal platform. The air felt electric, thick with unspent energy. The sky shimmered, ripples of liturgy twisting through clouds. The streets were crowded with priests and engineers shouting at one another, their arguments echoing across the golden plazas. Faith output is destabilizing the core matrix. No, your calibrations are corrupting the harmonic flow. Leora's presence silenced them for a heartbeat. Her sigil glowed faintly at her wrist, the mark of the ecliptic order. A young engineer approached her, sweat streaking his face. Are you here from the order? Please, we need help. The core's singing wrong frequencies. It's like it's angry. She frowned. A machine can't feel anger. He hesitated. Then you haven't heard it. He led her through winding corridors into the heart of Aurum, the liturgy core chamber. And there Leora understood. The core wasn't humming. It was screaming. A vast orb of light floated above the chamber floor, restrained by 12 massive pylons. Each pylon pulsed erratically, threads of raw energy snapping through the air like whips. The sound was unbearable, a mix of wailing metal chanting static and something that felt disturbingly alive. Leora stepped closer. Her eyes glowed faintly as she reached out to the flow, trying to listen. And that's when she heard him. Don't touch that, a voice snapped behind her. She turned sharply, and saw him for the first time. Arden Hale. He stood at the far end of the chamber, coat dusted with travel and soot, eyes glinting cold blue beneath the shifting light. He looked out of place here, like logic had wandered into a dream. His right hand held a small data spanner, the other tucked into his coat pocket. Leora narrowed her gaze. Who are you? The only person trying to stop this city from collapsing, he said dryly. You. I was sent to restore balance. He arched a brow. Ah, so a believer. And your dominion, she countered. He gave a humorless smile. Former dominion. They threw me out for asking too many questions. Leora's eyes flickered with curiosity, then suspicion. You shouldn't be here. The flow will reject you. He gestured toward the trembling core. The flow's rejecting everyone. I traced the instability here. Someone overloaded the harmonic matrices with unfiltered belief. She frowned. Belief sustains liturgy. Belief destabilizes it, he said. Faith amplifies emotion. Emotion distorts the frequency. It's like trying to stabilize a reactor with poetry. Her jaw tightened. And logic is doing so much better, I see. A spark snapped between them, not from anger but recognition. The chamber quaked violently. One of the pylons cracked, flaring gold. Engineers screamed as debris rained down. Leora reacted instinctively. her hands glowing as she raised a shield of pure light, absorbing the shockwave. Arden, unfazed, began recalibrating his handheld array, typing equations into midair. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Rewriting the containment structure," he said. "If I can synchronize the base frequency, the surge might neutralize." "You can't rewrite the flow like a formula." "Watch me." Leora cursed under her breath and joined him at the console, her light threads intertwining with his holographic data streams. For a moment, their energies overlapped, light and numbers weaving into one rhythm. The core pulsed violently, then steadied. Leora blinked in disbelief. "It's working." "Temporarily," Arden replied, jaw tight. "You're balancing the emotion. I'm anchoring the math. It's like two sides of the same current," she finished quietly. He met her eyes. For a heartbeat, the noise of the world fell away. There was something familiar there. Not memory, but resonance. And then the alarms wailed again. The containment pylons exploded one by one, streams of linergy ripping through the chamber. The light became unbearable. Too much for the walls, the machines, or their minds. Arden shouted over the roar. "If this keeps going, the whole city will fall." "Then we stop it." He laughed bitterly. "With what? Prayer or calculus?" She extended her hand toward him. "Both." They moved as one. Leora drew the flow inward, channeling the pure essence of Umbra's mind light through her veins. Her body became a conduit of radiance, her pulse syncing with the city itself. Arden activated his neural interface, equations cascading through his vision. Together, they reached for the core, faith and logic fusing into something neither side had ever conceived. The reactor responded, for 12 eternal seconds. Time fractured. The air thickened with consciousness. In those 12 seconds, they weren't two people anymore. They were one mind, a perfect fusion of emotion and reason. Leora saw numbers as symphonies. Arden felt belief as geometry. They touched every thread of Orum's existence, the prayers of its people, the machinery beneath, the pulse of the suns above. When they pulled away, gasping, the core dimmed and stabilized. The city stopped falling. But something fundamental had changed. Leora's thoughts swirled with mathematical symbols. Arden's eyes flickered with traces of gold light. They staggered apart, staring at each other in horror and awe. "What did we just do?" she whispered. He swallowed hard. Merged the unmergeable. The ground trembled again, softer this time, not destruction, but recognition. The flow itself seemed to sigh through the walls. And somewhere above, the twin suns flickered, as if blinking in disbelief. They spent the following hours helping the engineers stabilize the remaining pylons. News spread quickly. The city is saved. But neither of them felt victorious. When the last alarm died, Arden sat on a fragment of broken console, staring at his trembling hands. "You saw it too, didn't you?" he said quietly. Leora nodded. "The flow beyond the flow." He looked up. "You mean?" "The part that watches both faith and logic, the true source." He chuckled under his breath. "You talk like a philosopher. You think like a prophet." That drew a rare smile from him. As night fell, or what passed for night beneath the twin suns, they stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Orum shimmered beneath them, lights pulsing like the heartbeat of a living organism. "You know," Arden said, "when I was a boy, I thought the suns were an illusion. Two refractions of one star. Something explainable. And now?" Leora asked. He gazed upward. "Now I'm not so sure they aren't alive." She turned to him, studying the faint shimmer of gold still glowing behind his eyes. "You're changing." "So are you." They fell into silence, the quiet kind that felt shared rather than empty. When the first tremor hit, they both felt it before it happened. A deep pulse that wasn't physical but existential. The flow was shifting again. Leora closed her eyes. "This isn't over." Arden nodded slowly. "No. This was just the first equation." "Do you believe opposites truly balance each other? Or do they simply delay collapse? I'd love to hear your take." Above Orem, The twin suns drifted closer than they had in 1,000 years. For a fleeting instant, their lights blended perfectly, casting one united shadow across the world. And beneath that shadow, Leora and Arden, light and reason, stood together at the beginning of everything that would follow. The first collision had passed. The awakening had begun. Morning came slowly to Aurum City. The light that broke across its skyline was softer than usual, pale and uncertain, as if the suns themselves were catching their breath after what had happened. Aurum had survived the collapse, but not without scars. Its towers leaned at strange angles now. Its great pylons hummed in odd rhythms. The once flawless crystal walkways flickered with spectral cracks that glowed faintly in the dark, like veins of living memory. And in the heart of that wounded city, two people sat across from each other in silence. Leora watched Arden through the rising steam of her tea. He hadn't spoken for nearly an hour, his eyes fixed on the table's holographic surface. Equations shimmered and dissolved there, not because he was trying to solve something, but because his thoughts refused to be still. Finally, she said quietly, "You haven't stopped calculating since dawn." He didn't look up. Because numbers don't dream. They don't scream. They don't merge with people. Her voice softened. "You're still trying to explain it." "That's all I know how to do," he muttered. Leora smiled faintly, though her own hands trembled beneath the table. "And what if there isn't an explanation?" He met her gaze then, sharp, tired, human. "Everything has an explanation. Even miracles." "Then maybe miracles are just things logic hasn't caught up with yet." He gave a quiet, humorless laugh. "You sound like the kind of woman who'd make the universe nervous." She tilted her head, amused. "And you sound like the kind of man who'd try to audit it." For a brief moment, the tension cracked, and they both laughed. It was small, human, grounding. Outside, the city stirred. Crowds gathered in the plazas, torn between awe and fear. The great Linergy core was quiet now, but word had spread of what Leora and Arden did, that faith and science had touched, and the world hadn't ended. Not yet. The ecliptic order called it divine intervention. The rational dominion called it a data anomaly. But neither side could explain why the suns had flickered at the exact moment their minds merged. And that terrified them. By afternoon, the summons came. A sealed drone descended through their balcony window, its metallic wings folding neatly as it projected a message. "By decree of the Council of Balance," it intoned, "Leora Vance of the Ecliptic Order and Arden Hale of the Rational Dominion are required to appear before the Convergent Tribunal within the next solar cycle." Arden exhaled sharply. "Of course. They're terrified we broke their rules of the universe." "They think we are the rules now," Leora said softly. That night, unable to sleep, she stood by the balcony rail. The twin suns had drifted apart again, one pale gold, one deep red, but she could still feel the echo of their unity in her pulse. The flow beneath her skin shimmered differently now. Before Aurum, she had channeled the flow. Now it whispered back. Every thought carried a faint hum of logic. Every feeling carried structure. She had become something in between, and she could feel it breaking her and remaking her in equal measure. "Can't sleep either." Arden's voice was quiet, hesitant. He leaned against the doorway, the city's dim glow tracing the edge of his face. "Too much noise," she said. He nodded. "Same. But it's not out there. It's in here." He tapped the side of his head. "Ever since the merge, I can hear things. Patterns. Not equations, music." She turned to him slowly. "You hear the flow. Is that what it is?" "Yes." He chuckled softly. "So logic can hear God now. Great." She smiled faintly. "Maybe God's learning to speak in numbers." They fell silent, watching the suns in the distance. "You ever wonder," Arden said at last, "why it's always two? Two suns, two orders, two of us. Maybe the universe was never meant to pick a side." Leora looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "Maybe balance isn't about sides. Maybe it's about surviving the space between them." He stared at her, really stared, as if trying to memorize her words. "That space," he murmured, "feels like falling. She nodded. Then maybe falling is how balance begins. Before dawn, they left their quarters and walked through the recovering streets. Citizens bowed or whispered as they passed, unsure whether to fear or follow them. Children reached out to touch the edge of Leora's robe, as if proximity might grant them light. At the great plaza stood a fractured statue of the first founder. Half machine, half monk, its hands forever reaching toward the sky. Arden stopped to look up at it. You think he ever imagined it would come to this? Leora shook her head. He built a city to unite faith and logic, but he never asked what would happen if they truly merged. He looked at her sideways. And now we're his experiment. Now, she said softly, we're his result. When the tribunal doors opened, light poured out like judgment. The chamber was circular, suspended in midair, a ring of 12 figures, half cloaked in white, half in black. At the center, a floating sphere of liturgy pulsed steadily, reflecting the dual suns above. The High Arbiter spoke first. Leora Vance. Arden Hale. The Council has reviewed your actions during the Orem incident. Leora bowed slightly. We acted to save the city. By violating both orders' doctrines, another voice said coldly. The flow and the framework are not to be intertwined. Arden crossed his arms. Then maybe your doctrines are outdated. Gasps rippled around the chamber. Leora shot him a warning glance, but the Arbiter raised a hand. Speak freely, Mr. Hale. He did. You've all spent centuries guarding walls between belief and understanding. You've forgotten that both come from the same place, the human need to know. You can't divide the universe into halves and expect it to stay stable. The chamber flickered, the liturgy sphere glowing brighter, as if reacting to his words. Leora stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. He's right. The flow changed because we did. You can't silence it anymore. The balance you fear isn't destruction. It's evolution. The Arbiter's expression hardened. Evolution demands control. No, she said softly. It demands surrender. The liturgy sphere pulsed violently. Once, twice, and then shattered into light. Every member of the tribunal shielded their eyes as a wave of golden blue energy burst through the room, weaving through their bodies, their minds, their beliefs. In that light, every person saw something different. A memory, a truth, a lie. When it faded, silence fell. And in the center of that silence, Leora and Arden stood glowing faintly, their eyes twin reflections of the sun's. The Arbiter's voice trembled. What are you? Leora answered without hesitation. A bridge. Arden added, and a warning. They turned and walked out together as the council murmured behind them. Outside, the twin suns aligned once more, just for an instant, a brief trembling harmony before separating again. And somewhere deep within the flow, something stirred, ancient, aware, and waiting. The suns did not rise the same way again. Where once Solara burned gold and Umbra shimmered deep crimson, now streaks of violet danced between them, threads of energy that pulsed like veins through the sky. The scholars called it spectral interference. The monks called it divine fusion. Leora and Arden simply stood on the cliffs outside Orem and watched. Looks like the universe is glitching, Arden murmured. Leora's eyes glowed faintly in the new light. Or it's learning to breathe differently. He exhaled, rubbing a hand over his jaw. If that's true, then we've just rewritten creation. She smiled faintly. You always did want to leave a mark. Not this kind of mark. Below them, the world was shifting. Faith structures began flickering, temples humming with unstable resonance. The Dominion's machines, those designed to measure the flow, started producing impossible readings. Some citizens began hearing voices in their dreams. Others could feel the heartbeat of the planet under their feet. A balance had been disturbed, or perhaps awakened. And at the center of it all were two fugitives, a prophet of light and a heretic of logic. They didn't stay in Orem. After the tribunal, both orders issued covert decrees. The ecliptic monks called for Leora's containment for divine study. The Dominion labeled Arden an existential hazard. So they fled. For weeks, they moved through the ruins of the outer sectors, the wastelands where Lunergy storms howled and broken machines whispered like ghosts. They slept under fractured skies, using the warmth of the flow to survive the cold. Sometimes they spoke. Mostly they didn't. But the silence wasn't empty anymore. It hummed with something alive. One night, under twin crescents of the suns, Leora sat tracing a spiral into the dust. "Do you ever wonder," she said softly, "what happens when power stops belonging to gods and starts belonging to people?" Arden was repairing his portable scanner. Half listening. Civilization collapses. Or evolves. Depends who gets it first. And if no one controls it, then maybe, he said, glancing at her, it finally becomes free. She looked up. Free things scare people. So do unmeasured ones. Their eyes met, a spark, quiet but steady. Maybe, she said after a pause, we're both learning to let go of control. He smiled faintly. You think I'm capable of that? Not yet, she teased. But the flow's patient. By the 5th week, their bond deepened into something unspoken. Not romance yet, but resonance. When she reached for the flow, he could feel its pulse in his chest. When he wrote equations in the air, her thoughts began to finish them. It wasn't possession. It wasn't magic. It was synchrony. The monks would have called it the first balance. The scientists might call it dual-field entanglement. But for them it was just connection. That connection was tested in the ruins of Meridian, an ancient city buried beneath layers of collapsed faith and failed experiments. They entered to scavenge supplies, but what they found was alive. At the city's heart lay a construct, half organic, half machine, pulsating faintly with Lunergy veins. Its core resembled an enormous crystal eye, and as they approached, it opened. A voice, neither male nor female, echoed through the chamber. 2 frequencies detected. Harmonic match confirmed. Arden froze. It's reading us. Leora's light flared around her. No, it's responding. The machine rose, unfurling like a blooming flower, its petals of metal radiating energy. Query, it said. Are you the architects of the new balance? Arden blinked. We're just trying to survive. Survival, the voice replied, is the first act of creation. Before they could react, tendrils of light shot out, one wrapping around Leora's wrist, another around Arden's temple. Images flooded their minds. The suns colliding, the flow trembling, a vision of countless worlds spiraling around a single equation made of both light and shadow. Then, silence. The tendrils retracted. The codex has awakened, the voice said. Your resonance initiated the next sequence. Leora staggered back. The twin codex. We only theorized it. Arden stared at the construct, realization dawning. It's real. Balance demands its keepers, said the voice. And now the world will seek you. The machine went dark. They emerged from Meridian with new purpose and new danger. Their connection had triggered something ancient and powerful. A pulse across the flow that resonated through every mind attuned to Lunergy. Seers wept. Machines screamed. Priests fainted mid-prayer. Everywhere, people saw fragments of light and shadow twisting into a new symbol. 2 overlapping circles. One of reason, one of faith, forming a singular path. The symbol of the twin suns. By the time they reached the edge of the lunar frontier, bounty sigils filled the skies. Every faction wanted them to control, destroy, or worship. Arden checked his scanner. There's no safe zone left. Dominion patrols are 3 miles west. Leora closed her eyes, feeling the hum of the flow. Then we don't run. He frowned. You want to fight them? I want to teach them. He laughed softly, almost in disbelief. You're impossible. Then match my impossibility with your logic. He sighed. You know I will. And when the first wave of mechanized soldiers arrived, they did something that changed warfare forever. Leora extended her hand, drawing the flow into visible strands of light. Emotion, faith, pure will. Arden stepped beside her, overlaying equations into the air, weaving them into her light. Together, they formed the twin codex sigil. The battlefield erupted into color and chaos. Not destruction, but transmutation. Bullets turned to dust midair. Machines powered down, their cores resonating with new frequencies. Soldiers froze as their weapons became harmless beams of light. When it ended, no one was dead. No one was hurt. But every mind present was forever changed. They saw truth. That faith and logic weren't enemies. They were incomplete halves. When the last Dominion general fell to his knees, Arden turned to Leora. "You know what they'll call us after this?" She smiled. "Myth." He chuckled. "Myths don't usually leave witnesses." She stepped closer, her voice soft. "Then maybe it's time they did." That night, as the sun set together for the first time in recorded history, the flow rippled across the horizon. For the first time, the universe sang. And in that melody, their names were carried, Leora and Arden, the dawn and the dusk. The beginning of something neither divine nor logical, but alive. At first, it began as whispers, rumors of heresy, sightings of the twin-marked. The world had never known harmony, only balance through separation. And now that boundary was gone. In the cathedrals of the ecliptic order, monks prayed for deliverance from the false light. In the glass spires of the rational dominion, scientists swore to restore the purity of reason. But when the twin suns aligned again for the third time in a single month, and the sky split into violet fire, even their leaders knew something irreversible had begun. "Readings are off the charts," Arden said, voice taut as he worked at the console of an abandoned observatory. Holographic symbols danced around him, some made of numbers, others of pure emotion. The flow's resonance just spiked across 3 hemispheres. Leora stood near the window, her silhouette framed by the trembling light of both suns. "It's calling," she said softly. Arden looked up. "Calling who?" She turned toward him, eyes glowing faint gold. "Everyone." In the following days, chaos spread. Faith sanctums erupted in light storms. Dominion reactors began producing spectral echoes. People, ordinary people, started manifesting strange abilities. Some could speak in equations that altered matter. Others could heal through thought alone. The world had become a chorus of half-sung miracles and half-calculated nightmares. And in that chaos, both orders found one thing to agree on. Leora and Arden must be erased. The declaration came under a single banner, the Eclipse Coalition. For the first time in millennia, priests and scientists stood side by side, united not by belief or proof, but by fear. The Grand Monk of Solara declared, "The heretics seek to unmake creation." The Dominion Chancellor replied, "Then we shall unmake them first." They called it a war of preservation. But to Leora and Arden, it was the beginning of the end. They found out through a whisper in the flow. It came as a dream, not of fire but of silence. 1,000 voices speaking as one, cold and deliberate. "We come for balance." When they woke, the world had already changed. Skies burned violet. Cities emptied. The flow itself grew heavy, sluggish, like a river poisoned by belief and reason clashing inside it. Arden watched the horizon, jaw tight. "They've weaponized the flow." Leora nodded, feeling the distortion in her bones. "They're using both sides against us." "Then they've learned from us." By the second week of pursuit, the Eclipse armies began their assault. Temples repurposed into war engines, liturgy constructs powered by both faith and formula. They called them Archons, titans forged from shared hate. When one appeared over the ruins of the Western Valley, it blotted out the suns. Leora and Arden stood together beneath its shadow. "Any bright ideas?" she asked. "Only terrible ones," he said grimly. "Then make it work." The Archon's body shimmered with equations of fire, each symbol drawn from both scripture and science. When it opened its mouth, it spoke with 2 voices, one divine, one mechanical. "Surrender your resonance." Leora raised her hands, gathering the flow. "We don't surrender balance," she said. "We become it." Arden stepped beside her, activating the twin codex sigil in his palm. The air exploded with light. Her faith met his logic, colliding, twisting, harmonizing, until a storm of radiant symbols swirled around them. The ground itself trembled as their combined resonance pushed outward. The Archon staggered, its limbs cracking under invisible pressure. "Arden!" she shouted. "Almost there." He drew a circle of runes in the air, embedding her song into the center. Now, they unleashed the Codex. The result was not destruction, it was transmutation. The Archon didn't shatter. It dissolved into light, its essence rewriting itself into a tree of pure energy that bloomed where it fell. The valley transformed. Every rock, every drop of dust glowed softly, humming with new life. Leora collapsed to her knees, breath ragged. "We can't keep doing this forever." Arden crouched beside her, exhausted but grinning faintly. "Then we'd better end it soon." Words spread quickly. The Archon had fallen, not to faith, not to science, but to both. And that terrified the coalition even more. They escalated. Cities burned under lunargy storms. Oceans turned reflective, mirroring the twin suns. The flow became unstable, flickering between creation and collapse. Everywhere, people prayed to both sides and found no answer. Except one. The path of the twin suns. One night, they took shelter in the remains of an old temple library. Leora sat by a broken altar, staring at the carvings. "Do you ever think," she said quietly, "that maybe we were never supposed to exist?" Arden was calibrating his instruments, but he paused. "I used to. Now I think we were inevitable." She looked at him. "Why?" He smiled faintly. "Because the universe hates unfinished equations." Her laugh was soft but weary. "Then I hope we're the right answer." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're the only one that ever made sense." Their eyes met, the light between them flickering like heartbeat rhythm. For a moment, the war outside didn't exist. Then came the signal. Arden's scanner screamed, lights flaring red. "They've found us." Leora rose instantly, the flow pulsing in her veins. "How many?" He swallowed. "All of them." The ground began to shake as fleets descended from the skies. Massive warships powered by twin reactor cores. Each one carried armies, preachers, and logic enforcers. The suns dimmed under their arrival. Leora and Arden stood together, their hands touching, the flow crackling between them. "This might be it," Arden said. "Then let's make it beautiful." When the first wave struck, the world itself seemed to hold its breath. Leora raised her hand, summoning waves of light that curved and coiled through the air like living flame. Arden wove formulas into them, turning each burst of energy into structured resonance. Explosions of faith and logic tore through the armies. Not to kill, but to convert. Every blast that touched a soldier showed them visions. Memories of the flow, of creation's balance, of unity. Some dropped their weapons. Others fell to their knees, sobbing. But still more came. Endless. Unrelenting. Until the suns themselves began to bleed light into the battlefield, merging overhead. The eclipse had begun. Leora screamed as the flow surged through her. Too much, too raw. Her skin glowed like molten glass, her voice fracturing into 1,000 harmonies. Arden caught her before she fell, gripping her shoulders. "Stay with me." "I can't, the flow, it's breaking." "Then let me hold it with you." He pressed his forehead to hers, their energies fusing, their souls vibrating in perfect synchrony. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. The armies froze. The air crystallized. The suns merged into one colossal sphere of blinding light. Then came the roar. The eclipse wave expanded outward, not destruction, but revelation. Every living being touched by it felt the flow sing through them, showing truth beyond fear, logic beyond faith. And when the light faded, silence. The eclipse war was over. No victors. No losers. Only survivors, all of them glowing faintly with twin light, whispering the same word. Balance. Leora and Arden stood amidst the quiet ruin. The sky above was a perfect blend of gold and crimson. He reached for her hand. "Did we win?" She smiled softly. "We ended it." He nodded, eyes glimmering. "Then what now?" She looked up at the suns. "Now we rebuild the world that forgot how to dream." And somewhere deep within the flow, A pulse of laughter echoed, old, infinite, and proud. As if the universe itself approved. The world had stopped trembling. But it hadn't stopped changing. Cities that once burned with doctrine or data now shimmered faintly with the flow. Half alive, half remembered. Mountains hummed with resonance. Rivers whispered in twin tongues, carrying fragments of light downstream. It was as if reality itself was trying to rewrite its own story. Leora stood on the edge of the new dawn, watching the twin suns hang side by side. Equal now, steady, almost peaceful. Arden approached from behind, his coat fluttering in the quiet wind. "They're stable," he said, squinting up. "For the first time in centuries, the suns aren't fighting each other." Leora smiled faintly. "Maybe they've learned." He chuckled. "Or maybe they're just tired like us." They'd spent weeks wandering the reborn lands, helping survivors, teaching the children of both orders how to use the flow without fear. The word war was now spoken only in whispers, replaced by something new, harmony. But under the calm, Leora could feel it, a faint pulse beneath the earth. Something old. Something watching. The flow was no longer chaotic. It was listening. One night, they camped in the ruins of what used to be the Grand Observatory. The stars shimmered faintly, but they weren't the same constellations as before. Arden had set up his instruments, tracing new coordinates, frowning. "These aren't just stars. They're symbols." Leora leaned closer. "Symbols of what?" He hesitated, running his hand through the projection. "Of us. Of the Codex." "The Codex?" she repeated softly. He nodded. "The one we created when we merged the flow during the eclipse. I think it's alive." She stared at him, the firelight dancing across her features. "Alive?" "Yes," he said. "The Codex isn't just data or divinity anymore. It's sentient resonance, the universe learning from itself through us." Leora's voice trembled. "So we didn't just end the war." "No," Arden said quietly. "We evolved it." That night she dreamed. Not of light or war, but of a library, endless, silent, floating in the space between stars. Each book pulsed like a heartbeat, and every page whispered a truth she couldn't yet understand. In the center stood a single door made of glass and fire. It bore a symbol. Twin circles interlocking, just like the suns. When she touched it, the universe spoke. "Child of flow, bearer of balance. Awaken what you have written." And then she saw it, a shape rising within the flow, vast and shimmering, woven from every choice they'd made. The Codex. She woke gasping. The night sky above was flickering, constellations shifting, aligning into the same twin circle pattern. Arden was already awake, his devices screaming with unreadable data. "You saw it too, didn't you?" "Yes," she breathed. "It's coming through." "What's coming through?" She turned to him, eyes wide with awe and fear. The flow's memory. By dawn, the entire world began to shimmer. Not in chaos, but in awareness. Buildings pulsed faintly as if breathing. Oceans hummed in harmonic tones. Even the air seemed to carry whispers of thought. People started hearing voices. Not madness, but knowledge. Forgotten inventions. Ancient songs. The flow was speaking to everyone. And at its center it called to only two names. Leora. Arden. They followed the resonance to the heart of the world, a desert where the twin suns once met at the highest eclipse point. There, rising from the sand, stood a massive structure of glass and gold, the Codex Gate. It pulsed like a living heart, its walls covered in moving glyphs. Part scripture, part equation, all alive. Leora touched it gently. "It's beautiful." Arden ran his fingers over the glowing script. "It's rewriting itself every second. Like it's waiting." "For what?" she whispered. He looked at her. "For us." When they entered, the world folded around them. No sky. No ground. Just light and thought. They stood in a space made of living symbols, every line a memory, every curve a decision. The flow shaped itself into images. The war, the harmony, the balance they'd created. Then a voice echoed, deep and infinite. "You sought balance. You found creation." A figure emerged, not God, not machine, but a reflection of both. Its form flickered between human, light, and shadow. I am the Codex, it said, born of your unity, sustained by your will. But I am incomplete. Leora stepped forward cautiously. Incomplete how? I hold the knowledge of both faith and science, yet lack purpose. I ask you, what shall I become? Silence filled the chamber. Arden looked at Leora. If we answer wrong. There's no wrong, she said softly. Only choice. She turned to the Codex. Become what the world needs, not to rule it, not to end it, but to teach it. The Codex's light pulsed brighter. To teach. Yes, Arden added. Become the bridge we couldn't be forever. Let humanity grow from you, not beneath you. The Codex paused. Then it spoke, voice trembling like the stars themselves. Then so it shall be. From your hearts I shall weave the new flow, one that learns, remembers, and evolves. But to create it, I must take you both. Leora froze. Take us. Your essence formed my core. Without you I fade. With you I live. Arden exhaled slowly. So this is it. She looked at him, tears shimmering in her eyes. After everything, we end where it all began. He smiled faintly. Side by side. They joined hands. The flow surged. Light poured from their bodies. Gold and silver intertwining, singing. The Codex opened, absorbing their energy, their memories, their love. The chamber trembled, collapsing into pure radiance. Leora's last words were a whisper in the light. Arden, promise me. When they remember us, they'll remember balance. His voice answered through the glow. They'll remember you. And then silence. When the light faded, the world stood anew. The flow no longer needed to be controlled or divided. It simply was, breathing through every living thing, teaching, evolving. Children born under the twin suns could see both paths at once, creation and logic, emotion and structure. And they called it the Codex way. No one spoke of war anymore. Only of beginning. And sometimes, when the suns aligned perfectly at dusk, a soft voice whispered through the flow. Two voices, harmonized. We are balance. We are eternal. 100 years later. The world no longer knew war, nor did it remember the exact faces of the two who saved it. Only stories remained, passed through whispers, murals, and light. They said the suns used to fight. They said a woman of light and a man of reason taught them peace. And that when the suns aligned, their hearts became the flow itself. In the capital of Eidolon, a city built upon harmony, a child ran through streets paved with glass that shimmered with energy. Her name was Kale, and she carried a crystal tablet humming softly against her palm. The air was alive, music from the flow itself, played by unseen hands. Kale! A voice called from behind. You're late for your path readings. She turned to see Aaron, her brother, rolling his eyes with exaggerated patience. You keep getting distracted by those stories again. They're not just stories, she said, hugging her tablet close. The Codex talks to me through them. He sighed. It's not supposed to talk. It teaches through resonance. Kale smirked. Same thing. At the Hall of Harmonics, dozens of students sat beneath the twin suns streaming through the glass roof. Each student placed their palm on a floating crystal, their personal flow pattern forming in the air above, swirling light mixed with formulaic lines. The instructor, Master Sira, wore robes half woven with symbols, half with circuitry. His voice was calm, wise. The flow reflects what you are, not what you want to be, he reminded them. Balance is not built, it's remembered. Kale watched as her classmates' patterns emerged. One a wave of calm blue logic, another a blaze of passionate gold. When it was her turn, the crystal pulsed violently, and for a heartbeat, two patterns appeared. Gasps filled the hall. One spiral of living light. One matrix of pure equation. Interlocking perfectly. Sira froze. His voice trembled. That's not possible. Kale blinked, frightened. Did I do something wrong? No, he whispered. You've done something very, very right. That night, Sira summoned the elders, the keepers of the Codex. They met beneath the Cathedral of Resonance, where the flow's core pulsed beneath the floor. She's the first dual attuned in centuries, Sira told them. Light and logic, just like the myth. An elder with silver eyes leaned forward. You think she's one of them? No, Sira said slowly. But I think she's what they left behind. Kale couldn't sleep. The Codex crystal beside her bed glowed faintly, and a voice drifted from it. Soft, musical, ancient. Child of the new dawn. Do you remember the suns? She sat up, heart racing. Who's there? The voice smiled. She could hear it smile. Once we stood where you now stand. Once we asked the same question you're asking now. Who are you? She whispered. Names fade. Balance remains. But if you must know, call us the first light. Leora's voice, gentle, steady. Then another voice, layered with reason and warmth. And the first equation. Arden. Kale clutched her crystal tight. You're real. As real as the suns above you, Leora replied. But we are no longer flesh. We are the flow's memory. The Codex's soul. The room filled with light. Kale found herself standing in a dreamscape. The same glass library Leora once saw. The shelves stretched infinitely, glowing with countless lives. At the center, two figures waited, radiant silhouettes, one gold, one silver, holding hands. You've awakened what we left dormant, Arden said. The next evolution of the flow. Kale's breath trembled. Why me? Leora smiled. Because you believe and think in equal measure. You are our proof that humanity learned. As they spoke, she saw flashes of the past. The wars, the eclipse, the merging of worlds. She saw Leora's tears, Arden's resolve, their fusion into the Codex. And she saw the new world being born from their sacrifice. Cities that thrived on peace, scholars and monks studying together, logic taught as prayer, faith taught as formula. You built this, Kale whispered. No, Leora said gently. You built this. Humanity did. We only lit the path. Arden raised his hand, tracing a glowing symbol in the air, the twin suns overlapping. This is your inheritance, he said. The Codex is not a weapon, not a god. It's a mirror. Learn from it, question it, challenge it. Keep the balance alive. Leora stepped closer, her light warm on Kale's skin. Promise us something. Anything. When the suns align again, she said softly, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what the flow feels. That's where truth lies. Kale blinked, and suddenly she was back in her room, the crystal pulsing gently. Her brother burst in. Kale. The suns, they're aligning again. She rushed to the window. The sky shimmered, gold and silver merging into one perfect light. The people of Eidolon stopped in awe as their world glowed, alive, remembering. And in the flow, Kale felt them, not as voices but as presence. Two souls eternally intertwined, smiling through the light. Years later, Kale became the youngest high scholar of the Codex Order. Her teaching spread across continents, unity through understanding, emotion through reason. And on the anniversary of the Great Alignment, she stood atop the observatory, looking up at the twin suns. They said you became light, she whispered. But I think, you became us. The wind shimmered, carrying a whisper across the world. And we never left. Time no longer moved the same way. The flow, once an invisible current beneath reality, now was reality. Every life, every whisper, every dream pulsed within it like music. And above all, the twin suns glowed, not two forces struggling for dominion, but two hearts beating in harmony. They called the new age the Resonance Era. Kale stood before the Sanctum of Unity, a monument built where the Codex Gate once stood. Its walls shimmered with living glyphs, changing each dawn. People came from across the world to learn, to listen, to remember. Today was special. The Alignment Festival, the 100th since the eclipse of reality. A century of balance celebrated with light and logic entwined. Children ran through the streets, holding orbs that flickered between flame and crystal. Monks and scholars stood side by side, chanting equations that sounded like prayer. It was beautiful, a world finally breathing in peace. Yet as Kale walked toward the altar, she felt something stirring in the flow, not danger but calling. Inside the sanctum, the air shimmered. At the center, two beams of light intersected, one gold, one silver, forming a circle that spun slowly, humming in rhythm with the earth itself. Kale bowed her head. First light. First equation. It's been many years. The circle pulsed faintly, responding. And you have done well, child of the new dawn. Leora's voice, soft as sunlight. Then came Arden's tone, precise and grounding. The world is stable. Humanity no longer divides its truth. You have completed the cycle. Kale smiled faintly. Then why do I still feel you? Why haven't you left? Because, Leora whispered. Balance isn't absence, it's presence. We are the space between faith and proof. The chamber brightened, revealing figures forming from the flow. Not gods, not ghosts, but luminous echoes. Leora stood radiant, dark skin glowing like sunrise. Arden beside her, eyes reflecting the infinite. They looked older now, wiser. Less human, more eternal. You've guided them well, Arden said. The codex lives in every heartbeat now. Kale hesitated. But the flow, it's changing again, isn't it? Leora nodded. Yes. Evolution never stops. The suns will one day merge completely, and when they do, the flow will transcend even balance. Transcend, Kale echoed. To what? Pure understanding, Arden said softly. A world where truth no longer needs to be proven or believed, only known. A silence stretched between them, not empty but full. Kale took a breath. Will you stay until then? Leora smiled. No, child. We are part of the flow now, but even we must fade when our purpose ends. We were never meant to rule this harmony, only to begin it. Arden stepped forward. And now it belongs to you, and those who come after. Kale's voice broke. I don't want you to fade. Leora's hand, made of light, touched her cheek. Everything beautiful must become memory. Kale. But memory is how eternity breathes. Outside, the crowd chanted. The suns were beginning to align again, a perfect eclipse, gold into silver, light into logic. Kale turned back to the two figures. Their light was flickering now, gently dissolving into the flow. Wait, she said. If you fade, what becomes of the suns? Arden's smile was faint but steady. They will remember us. They already do. And as he said it, the suns above shimmered, their cores pulsing like hearts, synchronizing perfectly. The sky sang. Every surface, every being, every soul resonated with the same tone. The flow opened, not to consume, but to unite. Kale fell to her knees, overwhelmed by the radiance. The world melted into music. Every sound, every breath, every memory aligned. She heard Leora's voice, no longer distant but within her. We are light and we are learning. Then Arden's, woven into her thoughts. We are reason and we are faith. And together they whispered, we are eternal. The suns merged. For the first time in all existence, there was only one light. Not bright, not blinding, but complete. A perfect harmony of gold and silver, warmth and clarity. The eternal sun. When the glow faded, the world had changed once more, subtly, beautifully. The people called it the third dawn. The flow was still there, but gentler, softer. It no longer needed to be touched to be felt. It lived within everything. And Kale had vanished from the sanctum that day. Some said she ascended into the flow, joining the first light and the first equation. Others said she became the voice of the new sun itself. But in every corner of the world, when dawn broke and the single sun rose, people swore they could see three shadows standing at the horizon: a woman, a man, and a child. Centuries later, the legend endured. Travelers spoke of a world once split in two. Children learned the tale of Leora and Arden, how they turned faith into knowledge and knowledge into peace. In quiet temples, monks whispered prayers shaped like formulas. In shining academies, Scientists began their equations with "in the name of balance." And every sunset glowed with twin shades, gold and silver, as if the sky itself refused to forget them. In the silence of eternity, beyond the edge of time, two voices still whispered through the flow. Leora, do you think they'll ever stop seeking? Arden, no. And that's why they'll never fall. Leora, then we did well. Arden, we did what was needed. And as the eternal sun rose once more, their laughter, light and reason intertwined, echoed across creation. Because the path of the twin suns never ended. It only began again every dawn. If you made it this far, you're officially part of the story. Like and subscribe so you don't miss the next drop.